If you've ever sat there and gone like, man, I really wish there was one place I could go that just took all the science so I don't have to bother to read it, put it in one place, and then told me if it worked and how much to take and when to take it, that's exactly what your website does.
Welcome to Barbell Shrugged. I'm Mike Bledsoe here with Doug Larson. We have Dr. Andy Galpin, and our guest today is Kamal Patel, and from Examine.com. We're going to be talking about supplements, research, and one of the big reasons we're talking about this is because people tend to get confused about this very easily. A lot of magazines, online blogs, things like that are posting articles about supplements, and they may or may not be very accurate, and we found Examine.com to be a really great place to find that stuff. Can you tell us more about Examine?
Sure. So Examine.com is just information. What I mean by that is we don't, write articles about why low carb is good or bad or whatever. We report on studies as they come out. So if there's a study that comes out that says low carb diets can be used for controlling seizures in kids with this specific disorder, we report on that. If there's a study that comes out that says a new form of creatine is better for power athletes, then we report on that. And that's it. We just report over and over and over and over again. And that's our entire job.
And so you take the research studies and then you distill them down to something that the everyday kind of layperson who doesn't have a research background and is not a nutrition scientist, so to speak, can figure out and take that information and actually use to improve their health or their performance or what have you?
Yep. So we've got both. So if you look up creatine, possibly even on Google. Well, if you look up fish oil on Google, hopefully we might be on the first page. And when you click on the link, there's a summary up there that says what fish oil is good for, what's not good for, just in about a paragraph or two. But then after that is about 700 some citations worth of evidence. So we go through every system in your body, from neurological to gut health, musculoskeletal health, and we talk about all the studies that have been done on that, and if the studies are any good or not.
Yeah.
So that's really awesome because a lot of people they'll see, kind of like Mike said earlier, they'll see a blog article or something that was in a newspaper or a magazine or what have you, and it'll have some ridiculous headline like fish oil doesn't work, and then it'll have one study that showed that fish oil didn't do whatever they were trying to do, and then they generalize it across many different categories as fish oil doesn't work. But in your case, you're saying that if there's like 700 studies on something, well, it matters what the rest of the 699 other studies show, and so you guys break it down and show, or rather explain, what collectively all the different studies on a particular topic are saying about what the effects are?
Is that kind of it? If you're just an average Joe, or if you're a non-average Joe, if you're a competitive athlete, then you're probably thinking, what supplements should I take for whatever goal? To build more muscle, to lose more fat, to, perform better in other ways, whatever. So
He's talking about the bedroom.
That's what I was thinking too. I knew it.
So we got a lot of emails on that. A lot. Anyway.
Do you guys have a page on that, like sexual performance?
We do.
Real quick, though,
Yep.
I got a buddy. He was trying to get me to pick this stuff up in Chinatown.
Oh, yeah.
And you put it on the tip.
Just the tip?
Just the tip. Does it work?
I'd have to say it's probably going to work. Just the tip supplements tend to be the best ones.
Are all those emails from a guy named Schmike Schmedso?
Yeah, so testosterone boosters are not, unless you didn't already know that, worst category of supplements out there. Not because there aren't supplements that boost testosterone, just because there's very few, if any, that reliably and sustainably boost testosterone. So there's things, it's the perfect category to sell snake oil. Yeah. I think actually snake oil originally was a supplement to boost testosterone. I don't know if I can verify that. Maybe
should-
I'll look it
we
up
should
on my own.
create
I don't
a
even care if
supplement
that's.
now.
I
We'll
don't care if
Google
that's
it.
true. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I'm totally drinking snake oil.
Yeah, so snake oil is a thing. We're 100 years too late to see it in action, but people would carry around, vials of snake oil and sell it because it's a fatty acid. It's like fish oil, but it's snake oil. So,
It was like a cure-all back in the day.
yeah, it was a cure-all, and so the original snake oil was snake oil, and now the new snake oil is all the testosterone boosters. So there's ones that haven't been studied in humans at all. Horny goatweed, for example, my favorite to read about. And then
It's a great name.
and
Yeah,
then there's
I'll give it
there's ones with a lot of research, but
In toads.
in toads. Yeah, there's very sexually enhanced toads.
Yeah. Well, I remember reading about D-aspartic acid,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and I took that
Oh,
for
yeah.
a while, but then I started getting the sense that maybe I shouldn't be taking it. I forget
I feel
what
like that stuff kind of fell off the map. It was really
It
popular
was real
there for a
big.
while.
That is
reptiles
that's
was
the
like where they did
it's
most
the
of the
classic
studies.
story
Yeah.
of testosterone boosting supplements is, one or two studies come out. In this case, it was two, I think. And DAA is somewhere in between. It's not useless. It's not possibly useful. But it is one of the few that can actually impact testosterone. Like most, if not all the rest, can impact libido independent of testosterone, which is a trick. Because then when you take it, you're like, this has to be working. I'm an animal, but you're not. It's not the testosterone. DAA has a couple of studies, not super long-term, conflicting results. So, if you take it safely, go ahead and try it. But don't try it without getting tested. You should probably, or not tested in the conventional sense. For
not like STD test,
Yeah.
like get like your blood
Just
labs done.
before you take any supplement,
Mike, you should definitely get STD tested
Well, that's a given.
weekly.
So, but yeah, that's actually somewhere higher on the ladder of evidence. But all other testosterone boosters, not so great.
What
Well,
about
I think that study was luteinizing hormone.
Yeah,
Was increased.
yeah. So there's issues with
precursor.
testosterone boosters because there's other compounds in the body that you can affect, and then there's also like free versus bound testosterone, and then there's things downstream and upstream. So who knows? There's
You should
never
just be injecting it. That's the story.
Yeah, we only recommend one thing, which is injecting it directly into the tip, and that's it. That's it. No other way to go.
If you've ever sat there and gone like, man, I really wish there was one place I could go that just took all the science so I don't have to bother to read it, put it in one place, and then told me if it worked and how much to take and when to take it, that's exactly what your website does, right?
Yeah, so it's not like I don't have any time, but people like to say this, with my limited time, I need a source to go to, and I do this for everything. Like if I need to buy a device, I go to Wirecutter. I'm not making any affiliate money from this because we don't have any partnerships, but websites that write in depth about issues, you can outsource a lot of your thinking to them, and we're that for supplements and nutrients.
Yeah, and
That
you guys don't
basically
take money from any companies, no affiliates of those. So the whole idea for you is to go broke, and apparently to be unbiased is what I mean.
Yeah,
right?
so we're a big company in terms of citations, and we're a big company in terms of how many people are coming to our website, but we're not a big company in terms of money. I don't know if that's okay for me to say. We're
not on Barbell Business.
I can't wait.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're making it, but we're not Dr. Oz. We can't ever say take this because I don't regularly take any supplements. I experiment all the time. So I experiment. I try to be rigorous about it, but I only take what I have to take. So therefore I can't push supplements, and the website can't either because we don't make any money from pushing supplements. We advocate for reading stuff.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I subscribe to currently is you should never take the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
You should be mixing it up or coming off of things, cycle on and off of things if you really like something, but always be in some type of rotation.
Yeah, so whenever you talk to the smartest people in the field, they always cycle things. And the first interview we ever had for our Research Digest was a creatine researcher. And we asked him how much he takes and how often stuff. And he takes a normal dose, 5 grams, maybe 3 grams. And then he says he always cycles off. And we're like, oh, is there some new research about downregulation of stuff? And he's like, no, it's just there's no reason to take it all the time. You know, maybe there will be research in the future about adverse effects of taking it every day your whole life. Probably not. But the reason he doesn't take it is because, you know, you can stop taking creatine for weeks and you still have some creatine saturation, not complete saturation, but, you know, you have some and it'll start gradually dropping off. You know, save your money. You don't have to mix something into your drink every day. So, you know, creatine is completely benign, but then there's things like herbs, even multivitamins. We covered a study a couple years ago about a liver health registry, and I read the appendix about what supplements they found had hurt liver health and possibly led to liver failure or death. And, you know, and I was like, oh, this is totally going to be Beast Max Pro 10,000 or 15,000 or whatever. And
That's the best.
and I like
Until 20,000 comes out, or 22.
But you got to take that one anally. So like
Yeah.
it's an enema supplement.
We've been talking a lot about enemas before this started
Yeah.
recording. So the thing is, and Andy started it. I mean, possibly.
Andy loves suppositories.
Um,
so the bigger the better.
Yeah.
I'm
First
interested in
question
the
when
fact
we met, he said, "Where's your suppository page?" And I was like, "We don't have one yet, Andy. Just hold your horses."
And I said, that's why I don't use your website
"I
anymore.
know that's bullshit."
That's why it's off my syllabi.
Have to swallow the pills.
So I don't know. It's like,
Archaic.
Oh,
Okay,
anyway,
so-
anyways.
So regarding
Completely derailed.
Thank you. I thought so.
regarding some of the more well-known performance supplements, you got creatine, beta-alanine, maybe not performance necessarily, but like or some performance, vitamin D,
Yeah.
even multivitamins and things like that. Like the stuff that people are probably taking on a daily basis to improve their health and fitness if they're an athlete that is still competing potentially. Like, what does the research say about those variety of supplements? I mean, start with creatine and kind of
Yeah.
just work our way through them.
So think about it in terms of a Venn diagram, just because, you know, it doesn't really relate to anything, but it's cool. So Venn diagram with performance
Science and nerd.
enhancing and body composition supplements. And then the other circle is health promoting supplements. The performance supplements, the circle's like this big, and the general health is like this big. And then there's a lot of overlap. So
That was
If
really,
you're-
really small and really, really big.
If you were
weren't
watching,
watching the
yeah,
video.
if you're listening and not watching,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
the,
yeah.
the performance was small.
performance small, health big.
Yeah.
So
That's how simple
job.
it is on the website.
You should be a teacher.
reason is when I used to teach, students would get so confused. I don't know if that's bad to say for a podcast, but
Well, that's why you
But
developed
you've
the
learned
Matrix.
since then. and now
I've
you're
learned
better.
since then. The reason that is for performance enhancing is you can't trick your body into performing better. You can trick your body into getting better from a condition, but there's only certain ways to lift more at the gym or to lose fat or to gain muscle. And it's because, you know, we have fat for a reason, to conserve energy for famine, which never happens. And there's no use in carrying a bunch of muscle, you know. And in every sport, you know, fighters that are over muscled lose, you know, we don't need to carry too much muscle. So creatine has the most studies of any supplement, performance enhancing, and it works. If you're a non-responder, there's no great way to go about it other than make sure you eat it with meals with protein and carbs.
Yeah.
Non-monohydrate forms don't perform better. Creatine is possibly better for other things than for performance, though. So mostly cognition and depression. So there was a trial last year that was actually pretty well done on either major depression or treatment-resistant depression. I don't remember what. But the creatine group did much better than placebo, and there's some cool reasons why. Like, for example, the connections in the brain are typically conserved. Like, you don't have a big highway going from one region of your brain to another, but there are some areas that have those big information throughputs. They're called rich club connections. So creatine can make those more prevalent. And if depression is not you know, a lack of SSRIs, which is why going to the therapist or psychiatrist, taking a pill is usually not going to work, and almost every smart doctor knows this, but that's why supplements can be helpful, because then you can go about it from non-serotonin angles. And that's where things like creatine can come in. So for stuff like depression, even for older people, and obviously for people who don't eat much meat, creatine is a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's also a fairly direct fuel source for the astrocytes.
Oh yeah,
as well, right? Which are the little things in your brain that they need to have. They have to go through metabolism as well.
yeah.
Like they have to produce energy, just like your hamstring has to produce energy and ATP and all that stuff. Well, your brains, your neurons have to do that too. And creatine is apparently a pretty effective fuel for all those.
Yeah, and there's not many ways to change energy consumption or fuel use in the brain other than creatine, zero or low carb diet, taking some MCTs. So creatine is really, that's most of performance enhancement. The other stuff is usually minor, like beta alanine. Maybe you'll respond, maybe you won't. I used to like it because of the tingling, and that's it. I had no effect. But
I remember one client. He would take the beta alanine. He would get the tingles, and then he'd be working out. He's like, "It's working. I can feel the tingles." I'm like, "Good for you, man. Like, keep it up."
The best part about beta alanine, it's a fantastic bachelor party supplement. It's like you pop that thing in your glass before I'm at the club, and I'm just, what is going on here?
It's crazy.
Fantastic practical joke.
But yeah, there's just not a ton
almost
of
as
stuff.
good as the Viagra you put in my orange juice.
Which is a true story.
What?
Yeah. Another day.
At his bachelor party.
Okay.
He put Viagra in my morning orange juice.
The very beginning of the day.
Yeah.
Won't get out of bed because he's like, man, like, guys, I'm just can't get out of
like
bed.
a 4-hour boner. Viagra works.
Hey. Don't have scientist friends.
Yeah, so
Come
sports
back from that.
sports supplementation, not a lot reliably works, but some stuff could work.
Yeah, so like one example, I think that this will make it very easy for you to understand at home. When you're saying the reason why we have so much less information on sport performance stuff versus health outside of funding is because of the ability to make change. So something like meditation, which you brought up before the show, has actually a very large magnitude of effect on health markers, but that wouldn't make you squat more likely. Or it's not going to, well, maybe a better example is you're not going to put on 10 pounds of muscle meditating. Like there's zero chance of that happening.
I knew it was something.
I mean, it could be a side benefit from doing
Totally.
it, but it's not going to directly impact the muscle.
Right,
but,
but it could directly impact your health. It could to a
Yeah.
large magnitude, right?
Yeah, so there's a balance that has to come into play with, there's these studies that combine 4 or 5 supplements, and then they find increase in, performance and muscle and whatever. And it's tough because if you take any one ingredient, then the chances are pretty low of benefit unless, you just keep trying until you publish a paper. But then if there's all kinds of supplements, then the question is which one of those, if possibly all of them, is the one that had the effect. And that's why something like meditation, who is it? Dr. Furman did some of the first meditation studies, and it was meditation, healthy eating, and everything else, and it did awesome. And it's because it's everything. But, people don't care about that. There will never be an article in the media about, eat mostly whole unprocessed foods, exercise at least a couple times a week, and meditate, and it's amazing. It's because it doesn't sound catchy, And it's not easy either. Yeah. So an easy supplement's rarely ever going to do anything unless it affects hormones in ways that makes it get banned. That's it.
Banned supplements are the best.
Yeah.
In my experience.
For
Well,
sure.
that's why they're banned.
Yeah.
They work very well.
Especially on the tip.
Let's take a break real quick. When we come back, I want to talk about what would be dumb not to be taking.
All right, welcome back to Technique Quad. Today we're talking about rowing. Okay, so I like rowing for a couple of reasons. A few of the basics. It's a super conservative way to train. If you're brand new to training and you want to be able to just do some monostructural cardio, you could go for a run or something like that. You could do some air dying, you could row. Air dying, rowing, those are probably much more conservative than even just going for a jog. You're less likely to trip and fall, sprain your ankle, get knee pain after a couple of weeks, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Hit by a car.
Get hit by a car. So it's a nice conservative way to get started if you are brand new to training, and especially if you have lower body joint pain. And, number 2, especially for advanced athletes, I like it because it doesn't have a lot of stability demands, and it's not exactly self-limiting. Self-limiting would be things like double unders. You get tired on double unders and then you start missing and then you have to take a break because you missed. Well, on rowing, there's no real opportunity to miss. You could take a break whenever you wanted to, but you can kind of just keep grinding it out even if your intensity keeps going down, just because you're not going to fall off of it. And if you quit, then you have to mentally actually stop moving. You're not going to miss like you do on double unders and have to like take a break. So I like it for that reason because it has no stability demands, and it's not self-limiting. You can really dig yourself into a very deep metabolic hole where you're breathing really heavy, your heart rate is up, really, really high, and you can do some very hard intervals, and that's great training for your cardiovascular system, but it's not going to make you very sore at the same time because all the movements are concentric only, which basically means that you pull, and then on the way down, there's no resistance. So there's no resistance for your arms, and there's no resistance for your legs as you cycle back and recover from your pull. And then since there's no eccentric to the movement, and there's no resistance on the way back from your pull on the recovery portion, it's not going to make you very sore. So you can do a lot of hard intervals and not really get very sore in the process, at least if you're in moderately good shape. If you're brand spanking new, you've never done anything, then maybe you get sore like the first time. But it's not going to make you very sore, so you can do it a lot, and you can do a recovery row, and it's not going to beat up your muscles or your joints that much. It's a very conservative way to train. So I like it for that reason. Basics on technique. First thing, and actually since these are totally out of place for me, I'll show you that too. As far as the straps go, you want to put them basically right over where your toes meet your feet. So for me, that's about right there. That might even be a little bit much for me. Yeah, about right there. That way, if my heel does come off the ground, this goes right over where my toes meet my foot, and so it can stay down. It's not pulling on my actual foot. All right, so first, basically all good weightlifting technique or any movement technique basically centers around having good posture. So especially when you're sitting, which is where people tend to think about good posture, you want to be right about here, okay? My heels are, for the most part, down. My knee is bent about 90 degrees. I'm sitting up nice and tall. My arms are straight. And then basics, I'm going to drive through my heels until my legs get straight. Then I'm going to pull with my arms. And then the exact opposite. My arms go forward, and then my knees kind of stick back through my arms. Okay, so it's always sitting nice and tall. I'm always legs, arms, arms, legs. Driving through my heels. Legs, arms, arms, legs. So that's the basics. A few things that people do wrong, starting with my feet. A lot of people, they'll come too far forward. Instead of getting to about right here or so, they'll come forward and they'll bring their heels up and they'll kind of bounce the seat off of their heels like this. And they'll even reach forward like that, and then they'll give it like this big long pull. Okay, like really, really extreme like this. Okay, you don't need your pull to be quite that long. Sure, you definitely want as long of a pull as you can with good technique, but you don't need to max out your range of motion by going into bad technique. It'd be like rounding your back on squatting and picking your heels up off the ground just to make the bar move further, even though you're doing the whole thing completely wrong. So you don't want to do that on rowing either. You do want to go forward with straight arms, just right until your heels start to come up. They don't need to come up like that, but just my heels are down here. They're going to come up a tiny bit, and I can lean forward, and then I get right here. My heels are down now. I can drive through my heels until my legs are straight, and then I can pull with my arms. All right, point number 2, a lot of people bend their elbows too early. So if I'm here and I'm driving, I don't want to bend my arms before my knees are straight. I always want to have my legs go straight and then my arms finish the pull. I never want to get here and then pull with my arms before my legs are straight. That'd be like doing a deadlift where you're bending your elbows before your knees are, basically straight. You shouldn't bend your elbows at all on a deadlift. You should keep your arms all the way locked out straight. That way you can use the strength from your legs and the rest of your body, and your arms don't become your limiter. If you bend your elbows, well, now the strength that I have to keep my elbow bent becomes my limiter, as opposed to my straight arm and my legs becoming my limiter, okay? So I'm always stronger with straight arms, so I want to use everything I can from my legs and my back, and then finish with my arms, go back to straight, and then I can come back forward. Okay? So that's point number 2. You always want to have straight arms as long as possible, just like you would on a deadlift and just like you would on a snatch or a clean and jerk. Point number 3, I want to sit up nice and tall. So if I'm here, I never want to be slouched or slumped over. I never want to be here. I see a lot of people, they shrug and they kind of pull. They usually don't even make it all the way to their chest. Not that you need to bang it into your chest, but you at least need to get semi-close. So I don't want to be slumped over. I want to sit up nice and tall, good posture. So I'm here and I'm not rounded. If I round over, you know, I'm going to get more back problems. It's going to hurt my low back especially. I'm going to get more shoulder problems because I'm going to destabilize and roll forward like this. And then when I pull, it's hard for me to pull my shoulder blades together if I'm all rounded over. So I want to sit up nice and tall. That way when I go to pull, my shoulder blades can move back. Okay, my shoulder blades need to come back, and then my elbows come back, and my elbows stay in. I don't want to come with my shoulders forward and my elbows out like this with a round back. I want to be nice and tall. Nice and tall, shoulders back, elbows down and sucked in, and then I can come forward and come out like that. So that goes for any time you do any type of rowing, whether it's on a rower, whether you're doing any type of horizontal pulling, which a lot of people call rows, whether you're doing like a bent over barbell row or a ring row. I'm going to pull here, and I never want to be slumped over pulling like this. Okay, that's bad technique no matter what you're pulling on, the rower included. Okay, so I want to have nice tall posture at all times. One more quick point about sitting up nice and tall. When I'm sitting up nice and tall with a straight neutral spine, which, you know, that's a good term for rowing as well, even though you mostly hear it with respect to, you know, deadlift, squats, and Olympic weightlifting, snatches, cleans, and whatnot. I want to have a nice tall neutral spine here, and then I still always want to pivot at my hip. I don't want to flex and extend at my back. That's a universal movement law, if you will. Okay? So when I come forward, I want to, if I'm here, as I come forward and I want to reach a little bit, I don't want to round to get more range of motion. Okay? A lot of people, they'll round here and then they'll pull and they'll sit up straight when they get back here, and then they'll come forward and they'll try to get a little more range of motion and they'll destabilize and they'll round. Okay? I want to keep good posture when I'm forward. Come forward at my hip. Maybe I get a tiny bit of flexion, but it's minor with my spine. So I'm here, then I'm driving, and when I get to here, again, same thing. I'm just going to pivot at my hip a little bit. Okay? My spine stays neutral, and I'm pivoting at the hip. Okay? So I'm here, I lean forward, pivot and pull, arms, my knees come through the window, just like that. I never pull here and then move my knees and then move the handle around my knees. Okay? I drive with my knees, I pull with my arms go forward, knees come through the window, I pivot at the hip, and then I drive again. Right to here, forward, knees come through the window again. Okay? Never like this. Okay? And that's, see if I can do it like, that's probably more realistic of what you'll see. They'll kind of go like this. Okay? You want to go forward and then here. All right, so I'm going to talk about my own bad habit here, and you've probably already seen me do it. When I pull, the chain comes straight out, and then when I go back, I want it to go straight in. Okay? Straight out and straight in. What I don't want to do, and this is a minor thing, but it's a bad habit that I have, and I see a lot of people do it, is they come out and then they track along, almost like they're actually rowing a boat. So it's not necessarily like the worst thing in the world. It's a minor point, but it's a little detail that might help you get a little bit of a better time on, you know, your 500 or your 2K row, excuse me. All right, next point is especially relevant if you're doing a very short race, if you're doing like a 300-meter row for time or a 500 row for time, especially if you're a big, strong, powerful person. You don't want to pull hard. So I get a few rows in here. If you start pulling hard and then you start coming forward real fast, you see people going like this. And then if you actually watch down there, you'll see it move a little bit. Okay? The rower should never jump around, okay? If it's moving on the ground, then you're using your energy to actually move the rower,
not to pull the handle to move the flywheel to make your meters keep counting, okay? You're wasting energy. So what you want to do instead is you're always here, you pull hard, and then you relax. You pull hard, relax. Pull hard, relax. So if you're doing, if you're doing a 500-meter row, your strokes per minute is probably going to be in the 20s. It might be 25 or 27. You shouldn't be pulling so many reps. If you're pulling hard and then you're coming forward as fast as you can, then your stroke rate is going to be too fast. You might be able to lower your stroke rate by keeping your time, your speed, the exact same, which will over time help you save energy. All right, now that I've recovered. All right, as far as your grip goes, these handles they're not sticky, but they have a lot of friction. They're pretty grippy, so you don't have to grab onto these really hard. It's not like a barbell that's gonna roll out of your hand. It's not going anywhere, so you can be pretty loose and relaxed with your grip. You want your thumbs around it, but you don't need to squeeze at all. In fact, I could probably just be like this, and I could still probably row pretty well, even just with my fingers barely hooked over it and my thumbs kind of just hanging there. You don't want to do that, but that shows that you don't have to squeeze really hard to get a good grip on here. So just wrap your thumbs around and then nice and super loose here. That way especially if you're rowing a longer race, that way your forearms don't fatigue and that doesn't become an issue for you at all, especially if you're rowing rather, a 5K, 6K, 10K. That's a long time to be gripping something constantly, so you don't want to be squeezing barely at all. Just let your hands hang nice and loose. Let your fingers do most of the work. Your thumbs will be wrapped around it, but really your thumbs aren't going to be doing a whole lot. And you can just be hanging on the ends of your fingers. One more thing is where the handle is going to hit on your body, you want to pull it straight back into you. And usually for most people, that's going to hit right at the bottom of their sternum or right at the top of their abs, kind of the first two of your shredded six-pack. It's going to hit right there, okay? So what you don't want to do is pull super low where you're hitting yourself down by the belly button, and you also don't want to pull way up towards your neck like this just to get a longer pull. I see people doing that sometimes. They'll lean way back and they'll pull like this, and they'll try to get like the longest pull they can, which only lasts for so long. You're gonna get tired really quick like that. So you want to pull again straight back into you, which usually, if the chain is totally parallel to the ground and it's not going down and it's not going up, then it's probably going to hit you right about right below your sternum, and that's the perfect spot for it to hit. That being said, you don't need to like slam it into you every time. It's just going to come, maybe gently touch, maybe just get like right up to it, but you shouldn't have a bruise on your chest after you get done rowing. Okay, we get this question a lot too. What damper setting should you put it on? There's this 1 to 10 scale on the side of the wheel here, so which setting is going to be the best for you? This isn't resistance, so it doesn't mean that 10 is the most resistance necessarily and 1 is the least resistance necessarily, although there will be a change in resistance, and 10 does tend to be a little harder, but that's not really what it exactly is for. The damper lets more air in if it's up on 10 and less air in if it's down on 1. So even though it's more resistance up at the 10, if you're a big, strong person, a very powerful person, if you're a guy that back squats, 400 or 500 pounds and you're 6'2" and you're just a bigger, stronger, more powerful person, and you happen to be in really good shape where you can maintain that power output for a long period of time, then maybe you want to go with a higher number. The shorter the race, the more powerful you're going to be pulling, the higher the number, a higher number will help your meters accumulate faster, okay? If you're gonna be doing a much longer workout and or you just happen not to be as big and as strong as some other athletes, if you're a 125 pound female and you back squat 200 pounds as opposed to the 6'2", 400, 500 pound squatter that I just mentioned, then it might be better for you to maybe be down maybe on like a 4 or 5, for a 500 or, a 1K or maybe even a little bit lower if you're going longer than that. So overgeneralize, if you're big and strong, you can go higher. If you're not quite as big and strong, then you can go lower. That's the easiest way to think about it. There are tests available to find out your perfect damper setting. We're not going to talk about those right now, but you can use the Googles and find those.
Have you ever heard of the bone broth?
I've heard of the
Enema?
bone broth. The bone broth is that's one of the first things we got asked by major media, and it's actually super interesting because do you drink bone broth or
I do.
avoid it or?
I drink.
I don't regularly know.
I have a bunch that I made from my own elk and antelope that I killed.
Oh yeah.
Okay, all right.
So top that.
Yeah, top
Okay.
that.
Tell me
Okay.
that doesn't work.
So I make it out of nothing. I buy it sometimes, but don't really drink it regularly. But bone broth has no studies.
All right.
So, so when you try to research if bone broth is going to help, then you're going to run into a brick wall. And the issue is that certain things get so hype, like coconut oil, bone broth, and antioxidants, that you lose all perspective of potential benefits. So, I used to live in Chinatown in Boston, and I would eat tendon regularly because it was at our grocery store, right? And non-muscle meat is quite different than muscle meat. You know, different amino acid profile. There's some things in bone broth which is used to be muscle on the bone, cooked low and slow, and then stuff is released. And the stuff is like those amino acids, and then the things that you get in your joint pill. So the thing is, it's really hard to dose that. So if you're going to take something therapeutically for a specific purpose and you have like 2 weeks, then take a pill. Don't drink bone broth. But I think bone broth tastes really good, aside from the hype. And, I would otherwise be eating a bunch of junk food. And I think it's, just volume-wise, filling your stomach is good. So I think bone broth is actually a somewhat good supplement, not for performance, but.
I got a question for you. So if you're eating enough protein, do you need to take a collagen-based protein powder? Is there any benefit to that?
Yeah, there is. So there's a couple of reasons why. One is, so collagen makes up a lot of the protein in our body, especially in joint tissue and in skin. And there's two types of collagen that people take. One is gelatin or hydrolyzed collagen powder, and the other one is undenatured collagen. So the gelatin collagen powder is only somewhat interesting. It does have somewhat decent evidence. It could help joint pain, skin health, stuff like that. But the more interesting one is the undenatured hydrolyzed collagen, which just comes in little pills. So you would have to take about 10, 15, I don't know how many grams of the normal powdered stuff. And it doesn't mix well unless you get the hydrolyzed kind. But the undenatured is just 40 milligrams. And it doesn't work by taking the pill, it goes to your knee and your knee feels better. It works through your immune system because through mechanisms that aren't fully understood, your collagen can be attacked, and that's how often joint pain is exacerbated. And if you kind of immunize yourself by taking a little bit of collagen, then you can take that little bit of undenatured collagen, and some of the longer peptides will get through your gut into your bloodstream. And that doesn't happen with denatured collagen, which is gelatin, and gelatin is cooked collagen. So there are reasons to take collagen. The regular gelatin collagen is good because it has a different amino acid profile, like more glycine and stuff, and that could be good for certain things. And then the undenatured is good because the longer peptides get through, and it could help you prevent or decrease joint pain.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people will consider things like arthritis as autoimmune disorders.
Yeah.
Right. So if you then block that, there you go. That's why your joint pain goes away. You don't necessarily repair the cartilage damage, but you can remove some of the symptoms of the pain if you block that immune response.
Yeah. So, number one complaint when somebody goes to the doctor is their back hurts. And usually the response is take an anti-inflammatory. But, and everybody knows this, if the doctor had more than 15 minutes or if our healthcare system is different, then, like my sister is a naturopath, for example, and I'm of two minds because I know she's not listening to this, but she practices interesting stuff that works as well as homeopathy, which, I presume everybody knows is not even a thing. There's literally no
Right.
thing in the water or the pill. But a naturopath will sit you down for a while and then at least try to get to what caused the problem. And then if you read about potential causes of rheumatoid arthritis or osteoarthritis or even wear and tear from sports, a lot of the mechanisms are surprisingly similar. And the reason there's pain from conditions like MS and stuff, some of those tie in together. So you have to think about what caused the issue and then address that, and that's usually a lot more sustainable than taking a lot of fish oil.
Interesting. All right, so we've got protein or creatine, and we have whey protein. I think the bone broth and collagen thing kind of derailed us a little bit. What's the next supplement you would recommend?
So for performance and fat loss, I'd say a caffeine stack. So caffeine, or we don't advocate, but personally, when I was into body composition, I would take a stack.
So what is a stack?
A combination of caffeine, ephedrine, and aspirin, and the aspirin is optional. It might not do anything depending on your body weight.
So those used to be really popular like 10 years ago, like
Yeah.
15 years ago. ECA stacks were like a big thing when I was like in high school.
Yeah. So then what happened is people died, and
then ephedrine got a really bad rap.
and somebody at my university died who was on the football team, while I was there and getting interested in nutrition. So that's why it's not something that everybody should take. But a lot of people who are interested in losing fat for contests and stuff do take it, because you can buy Broncade or whatever at the store. And this is totally not, from examine.com, because we don't advocate anything that might hurt you. But if you're serious about fat loss, then that's the legal way to do it, because you can't trick your body into losing fat. But caffeine can be thermogenic.
Yeah. I take caffeine with L-theanine, mostly for cognitive function. Are there performance benefits from doing that, or am I getting the same performance benefits with caffeine without the jitters and all the negative side effects?
So I don't think caffeine and L-theanine together have been studied for performance. I think I might be wrong. And I don't know if L-theanine would blunt performance effects, but anecdotally I've seen it does nothing but help balance out the edge.
Yeah.
So.
Now, just to be clear with what you were saying earlier, in case you're getting really irritated with, he's like, did he just say your secret to fat loss is take caffeine? Sounds like the exact opposite of what your company stands for. And what you're saying is like a very special scenario if you're probably a competitive figure person in the last couple of weeks or something, you're trying to cut that last couple of things. It's not a terrible supplement, but that's not a lifestyle fix for your weight problem.
Yeah, no. So you really have to understand what your goals are. And if you're somebody who lifts weights, your goal is not to change your body fat from 14.1 to 14.05, which is what the stack will do.
Right.
But if you're a figure competitor or bodybuilder, then especially if you're natural and you're just not that big and you have to get really cut, that's where this kind of thing comes into play. And there's it can be dangerous. That's why I almost didn't say it. And the football player who died lived in my dorm, so it's not, if you have a pre-existing condition or just the odds are stacked against you, you can die. And then there's thermogenics that are really thermogenic, like DNP. And
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
So, that uncouples oxidative phosphorylation, and you actually do lose fat because you're producing heat instead of energy. And back in the day, I was on Lyle McDonald's forum, when I first started getting into lifting weights and ketogenic diet and whatnot. And then I posted a lot, and I was getting more into the science. So somebody, developed an online friendship with me over the messages, and I was like, oh, this guy knows a lot about science too. And then it was a ploy. He was just trying to get me to buy DNP for him because he lived in a country where he couldn't get it. And I was like, I'm not buying DNP for you because it's so easy to die. So extremely easy. If you get a batch that is a different potency, if you accidentally take 2 pills instead of 1, then you die like that, which is why, you just can't.
Sounds like it's worth it for me.
Yeah, it's only worth it for
You want me to cut
for
or
us.
what?
Just to finish this point, then we can move to another one if you want. But what is the efficacy and effectiveness of most weight loss supplements, the hydroxycuts, etc., things like that?
Usually it's little to nothing. So caffeine or stacked caffeine, realistically, if you take it, and you can't just take caffeine. Caffeine loses any fat-burning effect if you take it every day. So this isn't for people who drink coffee every day. But if you cycle your caffeine or stack, you might expect another pound of weight loss every 3 weeks or something. I can't quite remember. Hydroxycut or something, no matter how many studies they use, the active ingredients that work are only ever going to be caffeine and possibly one other one. And then there's things like raspberry ketones, green coffee extract. Literally anything that Dr. Oz says can burn fat won't. So, like,
calling them out.
I think
have
there's
my mother-in-law listen to this show.
there's maybe one raspberry ketone
not the whole
study.
show, just this part.
Just the sentence.
And it's just
not the first half.
like I don't. And it's nothing against these studies either, because like there was a study with raspberry ketones and 3 or 4 other things, and there was some fat loss. But what caused the fat loss? If you take raspberry ketones alone, that's not going to cause fat loss. And then whenever you base things off animal studies, like 90% of the time that doesn't work in humans.
Yeah.
So, all bets are off.
Dumb animals.
So it's my understanding, and I don't remember all the steps involved here, but if you take caffeine, it makes free fatty acids more readily available to be burned, but you still have to do the work to burn them.
Yeah,
of course.
It's not like you take caffeine and fat burns. Like lipolysis is a thing that is caused by something else, which is your activity.
Yeah.
So, you have to still be smart about it. You can't just take a supplement.
Yeah, it can ramp up the lipolysis, but it won't ramp up any oxidation. So the fat will be it'll be removed from the back of your neck or your stomach or wherever. It'll go into your bloodstream. It will potentially be uptook by muscle, but if you don't burn it, then it gets reesterified and restored. So that's why the studies can trick you and say, like, we scientifically proved our product increases lipolysis. It made it available,
Right.
but if you didn't burn it, then it just gets
Well, talking about bad research, a study like that, they could give someone a supplement and then measure the amount of free fatty acids present in the bloodstream and say, well, the amount of free fatty acids present in the bloodstream only occurred because it was taken out of the fat stores. Therefore, this thing burns fat.
Totally.
But that's very misleading.
Because it's not
I
going to
don't know if that's
lose.
been done, but like that could happen in a study.
Oh, it happens all the time.
You're shaking your head like it's done all the time. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what most of these blogs and all these other websites will catch on to. That's the references that these bottles will have on them a lot of the times. Or if you go to their website, those are the references they'll have. Either whether it's an animal study or it'll be one of these other indirect measures. And so they will be able to legally say it burns fat. And so that's how they get away with not being sued. But that doesn't necessarily mean they lost fat.
Right.
Which is the bigger difference, right?
Yeah, and the phrasing for a supplement label can be essentially anything they want. It's at the point now where federal regulation, it has been for the past 20 years, but as long as you don't say it cures a disease, you can say almost anything, and it's never going to be checked. And now that supplements are primarily sold online, there's too many supplements, so nothing's ever going to be checked. And, you must see this more than I do, where there's so many things that are claimed to increase muscle mass, but there's also so many things you can measure after a bout of exercise that don't translate into actual muscle mass. So.
Yeah, 100%. That's the major fallacy. There's 3 things that have to happen to grow muscle. You have to activate signaling proteins that tell your nucleus to replicate DNA to add. So you have to activate those signaling proteins. You have to express those genes the genes that program for your myosin and actin for your bicep or whatever. And then you actually have to go through the process of actually building. And then all that combines to make a bigger bicep. So really you can measure it at any of those 4 levels: signaling, gene, protein building, or the actual did I get bigger 8 weeks later. And so what they just will do is they'll pick one of those markers, but just because you get a 10% increase in gene expression or a 10% increase in protein synthesis, that will not equate to 10% bigger bicep. In fact, sometimes that means 0. Like the 12 weeks later, their arms are not any bigger or anything like that. So yeah, that's exactly what they do with the mitogen or muscle growing supplement lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
okay. Well,
so that being said, for fat loss and body composition, it doesn't mean there's no way to increase fat loss beyond activity. It might be overhyped at this point, but cold exposure does make you lose fat without doing any extra activity.
So it's like an ice bath?
Yeah, so ice bath or just cold exposure, so turning down your thermostat, walking outside with less clothing on, as long as you're safe.
So if you go out, you jog in, it's 50 degrees outside, you go jog in shorts and a t-shirt, you'll potentially lose more fat in that situation than
so it's
you
all
bundled
about
up.
exposure time.
Yeah.
So that's why something like a cold shower won't do anything. An ice bath will, because you're in it for a while. There's potentially some lingering effect. Like, have you had cryotherapy? And
I haven't done it yet, but I know what it is. You did it.
So that can slightly boost fat loss, and it's not because of the time you're in it. It's because the time you're out of it afterwards.
Yeah.
So if you do it for a month, you'll burn a bit more fat. And then because you're at work, presumably the whole day, especially if you work at home, wearing shorts and a t-shirt in 64-degree weather versus 70 is actually quite a bit of calories over the course of the year. So that is a way to hack your fat loss that is safe and doesn't involve any money.
I watched Kelly Starrett do a talk, and he talked about burning 100,000 extra calories a year by standing at your desk versus
So that
sitting.
was the second thing I was going to bring up. So
It's like the equivalent of running, like, 20 marathons or something.
yeah, so like the bare minimum you should do when you're working is take micro breaks, every 20, 30 minutes. But as long as your trunk is engaged, when you're not sitting, you're burning some calories. Once you're sitting, nothing's going on from here down.
That's why we're
It's out
standing
of
right
camera.
now. We're trying to get shredded.
Exactly.
Yes.
So those are the two ways. Those two combined will do more than anything, any supplement.
Are there any supplements that jump to the front of your head that you think are really effective or you're really excited about that people aren't talking about?
Yeah, so let's see. There's one that everybody's talking about, but possibly not the right way. So probiotics, everybody and their mom, usually the mom, is taking probiotics. And and it's a lot more complex than people think. So we have a complex environment of microflora in our gut. And you can get it tested. You can go to a company and test what kind of species of bacteria in your gut, but they've been there for a while doing their thing. When you take a capsule of probiotics, it's not going to go down there and like be king, So there's a couple options. It might do nothing because probiotics don't permanently colonize your gut lining. Once you stop taking them, that's it. Usually that is. And then there's a lot of stuff that people didn't know when they started researching probiotics. So they're like, well, probiotics don't colonize the gut, so why was there still some impact after the person stopped? Or these probiotics were damaged, but they still had some impact. Dead probiotics can also have an effect because the components of the cell wall can affect what goes on in the gut. And, tell me if this is too far left field, but when you take probiotics, it's usually like you have gut health issues, or nowadays there are studies on probiotics and performance, or probiotics and depression. Depression is because there's a direct connection between the gut and the brain. Performance is because the brain is involved in performance, plus the muscle, needs a nervous system to perform. And most people's guts don't have a wide enough variety of bacteria in them, and we don't have any parasites in our gut, which is good.
Some of us don't.
Some.
I got that shit handled.
Okay, my
Yeah.
bad. My bad. Didn't want to trigger you, but so we want to make our guts more diverse. So one way is eating more plants, but the other way is probiotics, and you can't just take probiotics and then things are better. We had talked before the show about prebiotics and probiotics.
Mm-hmm.
So companies have started adding like inulin to their probiotic pills or to their foods. It's a terrible idea because I don't know what percentage of people, but a fairly big chunk of people get diarrhea or gas after inulin. And, why put that in everything? It's like how orange juice makers, my orange juice probably has calcium in it now. Calcium supplementation, just like haphazard, is not a good thing. Atherosclerotic plaques and arteries, there's calcium in there. So you don't want calcium just like willy-nilly in soft tissues. So similarly, I think probably a better strategy than getting a fancy probiotic is eating normal food, starting with a probiotic and microdosing it. So you don't want to just introduce a probiotic because who knows what's going to happen. Start with a little bit, see when there's any effect, and then titrate up over time. Because when I used to experiment a bit more with wacky supplements, I would start low, go high, and I would double blind myself because I was crazy. And, then I knew if a supplement was doing anything. And I'm not saying, go to extremes like that, but do things in a rational manner. Don't just take a bunch of stuff and see if anything works.
Yeah, I started taking probiotics last June. I saw a benefit.
Yeah.
There was obvious benefits. I felt better, and I started going to the bathroom better too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's number 1 or number 2. Going to the bathroom better.
Your point about the calcium is also very true for things like magnesium, for iron, right? These things have major toxicities when they're not appropriately dosed, right? So you don't want to just take these things like, oh, well, I guess vitamin C is good, I better take that. I guess vitamin E is good, better take that. Like iron, we need to have a better approach to that because some of them can be extremely toxic.
So like iron, for example, anybody that's cool cooks in a cast iron pan.
Yeah.
Can we agree here? Anyway, I don't, but cast iron pans are made out of iron and leach iron, especially if they're not seasoned correctly. And when you got iron from that, if you happen to take a multivitamin with iron and then like a fortified cereal or something, and then you eat a lot of meat, all of a sudden you're getting too much iron. If you don't let blood ever, then a decent proportion of white guys genetically...
Notice how he pointed to you, not me.
Yeah.
Not me.
Am I the most white guy in the room? What about Mike?
Definitely the whitest guy.
Who'd you point at?
I don't want to say anything.
Okay, go ahead.
So, a decent proportion of people who have ancestry from Europe can easily build up iron in the blood, and iron can very easily be a pro-oxidant. So iron and vitamin C together, possibly not that great of an idea no matter what people recommend. So there's problems with iron that never get talked about in the news. So when the red meat and cancer scare came out a couple years ago, a report from the World Health Organization, red meat is totally fine, even though they classify it as a carcinogen. But heme iron interacts with gut lining differently than non-heme iron, which is why no matter how much iron you eat from plants, it's not going to have a negative effect. But heme iron from animals could, depending on how much iron you get and how healthy your gut lining is. So that just shows all this stuff works together. If you don't take probiotics and you eat junk food and your gut lining sucks, then you might have a worse problem by eating a lot of red meat. But in the context of a healthy diet, red meat, we've eaten it forever and it's totally fine. So you can't just isolate one issue.
Yeah.
So for prebiotics, or rather, excuse me, for probiotics, I heard that if you take a bunch of antibiotics and then you essentially destroy your microbiome in a way, to kickstart it again, so to speak. Some people say you should take probiotics, but one of the arguments I've heard against that is that, well, you have an immense diversity of healthy bacteria in your gut, and then you take a probiotic and it's 5 strains, and you don't really do that much good since you might have had many dozens or hundreds, or I have no idea how many different strains of bacteria are in your gut. But if you only introduce 5, you're not really attacking the problem at a high level.
Yeah, so this kind of gets at what I talked about before. People microdose probiotics sometimes if they have a very sensitive gut. But other examples are if you had a colonoscopy, if you had heavy dose antibiotics, then you don't know what happened to your gut, because a colonoscopy irrigates and washes out bacteria, like 80%, 90%, up to that level. A broad spectrum antibiotic can wipe out a lot of bacteria, but it only wipes out certain bacteria, and it makes other bacteria stronger because they take up the space other bacteria were in there. So then if you take a probiotic, like, with 10 or 20 billion units, and then you have a low species diversity of probiotics that are not helping, you can get into huge trouble. And that's where I have a friend who works for the CDC in the department that looks at C. diff and other hospital-based infections. And it's mostly an issue with older people because, your gut health goes down, you have infections, you're in the hospital. But it's happened with younger people where something happened, you took antibiotics, possibly you took probiotics, and then you have some crazy, food poisoning or something. And then 2 years later, you have a colostomy bag. Is that what it's called? And you can't poop. So, even if there's a 0.1% chance of that happening, that's high enough for me to think when you take supplements, the number one thing you want to avoid is the worst case scenario. You don't want to die. You don't want to have some crazy disease. That's why taking a small amount of a probiotic of one that has a lot of different species or a fermented food would probably be better. Ideally, you'd have your own fecal microbiota in pills, and you could take that, so you're replenishing your old supply. But I think most people don't have those.
Yeah, most people aren't there yet. Okay. That's a great topic to dig into, though.
Yeah, I mean, I currently change probiotics every 3 months, and it's got a ton of I'm not buying the cheap stuff that's just at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then obviously a lot of fermented food.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have friends that have done fecal transplants.
Yeah.
You know, they found somebody who was very healthy, taking their poop, put it up their shooter, and
Yeah, so
that's it.
fecal transplant is possibly the most interesting topic that's been around the past year or two. And so I was talking to this guy at the CDC about it, and he was like, "Yeah, it's like too many people are doing them." And I was like, "What? Why? Has there
What does
been
that mean?
harms?" And we're coming from different angles because he's trying to make sure that nothing weird happens that he can't predict to cover the CDC's ass.
Mm.
And from my perspective, there's 2 ways to get, or 3 ways to get a transplant. You either have C. diff, in which case you're allowed to go to a doctor and get a transplant. You can go to a clinic that does screening, but it's not regulated, so a naturopath or something, often outside the U.S. now. Like there's one in the Bahamas, I think. Or you can do it yourself. And the do-it-yourself, it ends up being the same, but oftentimes people aren't screening. And there were like very slightly alarming case studies, like somebody had a fecal transplant and they gained a ton of weight and they don't know why, and it's linked to the transplant. I mean, that's not great, but they didn't die. I mean, I'm not saying just go out and do one, but people are often facing the issue of like, I cannot solve my condition at all. I don't know what to do. Pills aren't helping. I don't want to take, prednisone the rest of my life. Yeah, fecal transplant, whatever, or other things like, low dose naltrexone. Have you heard of that?
Mm-mm.
So autoimmune conditions can be tough to treat, and one thing that some people online look at is a drug called naltrexone, which is used to treat opioid overdose and also addiction to some things. And because it works on opioid receptors, and opioid receptors are involved in other things, low-dose naltrexone, if you take it at night in a very small dose, starts working at night when you're in bed and blocks the opioid receptor in your brain. And then the next day, your body can respond by boosting its endorphin production a little bit. And then there's some other mechanisms, but there's been some small trials of like MS symptom reduction, multiple sclerosis symptom reduction, and a lot of gut diseases are autoimmune in nature. So, the doctor's never going to talk about this kind of stuff with you, and we don't actually discuss low-dose naltrexone on our website, but it really pays to understand research a little bit, because then you can understand fecal transplants if you absolutely need to, or, low-dose naltrexone.
And to note, you want to get a fecal transplant, you want to get that sample from somebody who's healthy. That's the idea. You're not just taking any random shit.
You're not just at the 7-Eleven like, yeah. Okay.
Okay, so we went through somewhat of a top 5 per performance, and then we've talked about health here and there, but we haven't really made like a top 5 health supplements list.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to do that, what would be on that list?
So one is something that overlaps with performance that I should have mentioned, which is nitrates. So creatine works a lot for performance, and by a lot I mean reliably. And the second one that is fairly reliable is nitrates. And nitrates are found in certain foods, beets, red beets, and kale, and some other leafy greens. And there's just been more and more evidence every year that it helps with different types of performance. So most often sprint, but possibly some shorter endurance activities and possibly some lifting activities, and definitely for CrossFit type stuff when you're often on the go. And there's no like nitrate supplement in and of itself because the government regulates sodium nitrate as a dietary additive for red meat or for processed meat. But you can eat beets, you can make a kale smoothie, or you can get beet powder or something. And that's almost definitely going to help, and it's by increased blood flow and some other stuff.
So the precursor to nitrate is arginine for the most part, right? So what about arginine supplements? Are those shown to be effective or not?
Arginine a little bit, citrulline a little bit, neither as good as nitrates.
So if you really want the nitrate, it's either you can't get it or you got to eat it from the food.
Yeah,
for the most part.
And the thing about eating it from the food is, so when you eat food versus supplements, there's a slower breakdown and absorption of compounds in the food. And that just makes it all the better for nitrates because you want the nitrates to be in your bloodstream a bit longer and a bit more extended because part of the benefit of nitrates is performance, but the much more important part is heart health. Like we didn't know by we, I'm saying I represent every researcher ever. We didn't know why plants were good for heart health. And then researchers were like, it's the fiber. It's got to be the fiber because animals don't have fiber and plants do. And they're like, it's probably not the fiber. Oh, it's probably the antioxidants. No, it's probably not the antioxidants. So possibly a big part of it is nitrates. There's not that many foods that boost nitrates. People who eat those foods tend to have better heart health. There's never going to be a 20-year randomized trial of eating kale. But in absence of that, I'm saying, kale is overhyped, but kale and beets and arugula and a couple other things that are high in nitrates are always worth putting at least maybe one into your diet, assuming you can stomach it.
I'm going to blow your mind. I drink fermented beet juice most mornings.
I can't talk anymore. It's too much.
Didn't you experiment with acute use of high dose beet juice before a workout, and didn't that not go well?
It didn't go well for me. It was way too high.
What happened?
And I also added in raw eggs. So it was raw eggs and beet juice, and I mixed it all up.
And hill sprints.
And then, hill sprints in 105-degree weather. And so when I was throwing up amongst a crowd of 100 people that were all doing it with me, it looked like I was puking up blood because it had like that consistency from the egg, the raw eggs with the red beet juice. So it really looked like I was blood.
So you didn't tape this? You were saying before you don't tape the best
I was
moments?
pretty miserable. That's like 100%. 100% moments don't make it to Instagram. Yeah.
I didn't see that happen. I wish I was there to actually see it. I was busy.
People were
doing
worried.
The workout.
People were worried. I was like, I just woke up late and drank way too much beet juice, and I'm just throwing up.
That's the thing.
And people
I like
are
how
like,
you put eggs
"Holy
in
shit!
it."
Call 911. That dude's dying." Yeah.
Yeah, I know beet poop as well. That can be worrisome.
Totally. If you juice beets.
Yeah.
You got to watch
You'd
out.
be like, oh my God, what happened to me?
Yeah, I'm dying.
Okay.
So nitrates,
Yep.
wellness and performance. Number 2, let's see. A really good multi-mineral, not a multivitamin, because that's a dime a dozen. Doesn't matter quality, who cares? But we're rarely short in vitamins. At least people who pay attention to what they eat. And a lot of people take supplements that have some vitamins in them, but the issue with minerals is that vitamins are tiny and minerals are big as far as quantity that you need in your body. So, the amount of vitamin D you need in your bloodstream is extremely tiny, but the amount of magnesium you need is so big that a multivitamin producer will never put enough in a pill because then it'll be too big to swallow.
Yeah.
So it's a logistic problem, and that's why there's packs with 20 pills that suck to take and you just stop taking them. But rather than taking all those pills, just focus on what you're not getting enough of. So, if you are interested at all in nutrition, track at least 2 days worth of what you eat on average days, 1 weekend day and 1 weekday. See what you're low in. There's only a couple services that look at micronutrients, so use one of those. And eat more foods that have those things you're missing. So, for most Americans, it's minerals, magnesium, iodine. Like people avoid salt and then they don't get enough iodine. Plus, iodine in higher amounts is sometimes therapeutic. So there's not a ton of studies on this, but doctors hundreds of years ago used to just give you iodine. Like they would let your blood, they would give you iodine. The bloodletting doesn't work, but the iodine sometimes does work. And more and more people have thyroid issues now, and possibly that can help, sometimes harm. And then magnesium, it's extremely hyped for a reason because it's involved in almost everything. If you have things that involve too much excitation, and often that's like not falling asleep, then magnesium is something to consider. So a multi-mineral is good, and it has to be a quality one because the most common form of magnesium is magnesium oxide, which is absorbed at a very low rate, like 10% or less. In fact, that's why milk of magnesia helps you poop. So take anything except for magnesium oxide, citrate, threonine, whatever. They all work fairly well. And then if you don't want to take a magnesium supplement, eat foods with magnesium, or if you have a lot of money, drink mineral water. And some mineral waters have magnesium in them too.
I think you just made a really good subtle point that all these things in nature, they don't have one effect. So magnesium doesn't help you fall asleep. Magnesium just does what magnesium does. we can then use it if we're depleted or low in that to help us get to sleep better because of excitation. But at the same time, you said it can help you go to the bathroom, or if you have enough of it and you add with that supplement, it will give you a bunch of diarrhea.
Yeah.
Which is the same effect, right? So if you're taking magnesium, if you try that and you're like, oh my gosh, I got diarrhea all the time. Well, that's the thing it does.
That's how I wake up in the morning. Is I drink magnesium before bed, and when I wake up with the shits, so it's like
Wakes him right up.
better than an alarm clock every day of the week. No snooze button on that.
Yeah.
So that applies to everything, you know, not just magnesium, I think. And the next year we're going to try to centralize some of our side effect information so it's easy to see, you know, on a range of however many milligrams to however many, where there might be benefit and harm. And that's down to like the most benign supplement, like vitamin C.
Yeah.
You know, it's super overhyped and underhyped, strangely at the same time. So, you know, it's overhyped because people will take it at the first sign of a cold. They'll take it because they want energy. You know, you don't produce energy by taking vitamin C. On the other hand, have you ever seen House, the show? Dr. House.
I know what it is, but I don't
I've
watch
just
it.
seen it. Yeah.
He's
So-
got a cane. That's all I know.
He has a cane. He's a jerk, and he's really smart. So in this one episode, he gets shot by a patient, and then he has to go into surgery, and he has some strange dream, and he has really bad pain because he had a blood clot in his leg many years ago, and that's why he walks with a cane. So when he goes under, he has this dream, and then when he wakes up, he tells his boss slash lover, put me in a ketamine coma, and then he goes back under.
Oh, shit.
And then when he comes out,
K-hole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
he enters a K-hole, comes out, no limp, no pain. So the reason is actually related to vitamin C. So vitamin C is a primary water-soluble antioxidant that does some stuff that other antioxidants can't do. And this very bad pain condition, reflex sympathetic dystrophy, is one of the worst pain conditions. There's a scale called the McGill Pain Index that's used in studies that goes up to like 50. Childbirth is like 24 or something, as is breaking a bone. And this condition can be up at like 41. So it's extremely painful. When you have it, sometimes if you go outside.
So what you're saying is childbirth isn't that bad.
I'm saying like I would do it right now if I had the option to, but luckily.
Compared to this other thing? So wait, is chronically like that? Like all day, every day? You're out of 41?
It's chronically like that. It's terrible, you know. And the only way to get out of it is a ketamine coma. And ketamine coma is not allowed in the U.S., so you have to go to Mexico or Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And House on the show, like, told his dream self, told his awake self to do it, and then, you know, and 7 years later, after I started reading about this stuff, I was like, didn't I see an episode of House about this? So I looked it up. And then what I found is, there's ketamine intranasal sprays that could possibly help, and ketamine drips and stuff. But more interesting than that, nutrition related, is that they didn't know if you could prevent this condition, RSD, before they started looking at vitamin C. So the way RSD develops is often you'll have surgery or break your ankle or just have some injury lifting weights. And then you're like, it's not getting better. Now it's getting worse. Now it's swelling up. Now, like, extra hair is growing, or, you know, just crazy shit. And the people who took vitamin C every day in supplemental form didn't get this condition. So then they did their first randomized trial, and they're like, you know, comparing normal dose to higher dose to no dose. It actually only takes extremely normal dose, 500 milligrams of vitamin C every day for 30 days after you get injured to prevent this condition. So vitamin C has all these cool uses because it's this special antioxidant that don't get talked about. All it ever is like, oh, got to take my emergency, feeling a cold coming on. But vitamin C is actually not very good for that. You know, you have to take it kind of for an extended period before you get a cold usually.
Yeah.
But there's cool uses potentially aside from that.
Right on. What's next?
So how many is that?
What's the
that was like
ketamine do
3.
again? That's what I'm confused about.
Ketamine?
What are the benefits of that?
So anybody taking ketamine?
I do not take ketamine.
Okay, so I have.
I have. Yeah.
But it was for therapeutic purposes.
Me
So
too.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a receptor in the brain, the NMDA receptor, that is involved in a lot of stuff, and can also possibly be a target in the future for depression-oriented medications. But ketamine is on the list of World Health Organization required drugs or whatever, because it used to be used as a. Can we stop for a second?
Yeah.
I just got a foot cramp.
Surprise, we're back. All right, we were talking about. I was asking about ketamine.
Yeah, so ketamine. It is a NMDA receptor antagonist, meaning it blocks this receptor. There's also other things like D-serine, an amino acid that affect the receptor that could be used for depression. But anyway, ketamine is often used recreationally, but its most promising role is it could help depression, like in the course of one dose. There's people who have treatment-resistant depression or anxiety or something that just doesn't respond to anything, and NMDA can be critical in this. So I took it for pain. So I have this crazy condition, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, where my joints are often tearing. And after a while, I was like, I don't want to keep taking opioids for years and years because then you get some sensitization and then bad stuff happens. So I got a ketamine drip from this doctor, this anesthesiologist, and it was interesting. So ketamine can sort of reboot your nervous system within the course of one high-dose session. And I think I had 750 or more milligrams of ketamine.
Oh, that's a lot.
And the thing is, I was going under as the doctor asked me about the dose, and so I didn't know what was going on. He was like, 750 okay, or 1,000? And I was like, I don't know what's going on. And I'm like going under, and he's like, if we go high, then we're gonna have to give you. And I didn't hear it, and I just went under.
Yep.
So then, then I woke up, and my girlfriend drove me home, and I couldn't move at all. So I was just like being pulled along, and I think I possibly was drooling, and then I had to pee, and we had to stop at a library, and I peed just out the car.
From what I understand about ketamine, that's a very high dose.
So yeah, it's a pretty high
dose.
dose.
Like a party dose would be, people do like between 100 and 200.
Yeah. So and this was in a drip, so it all happened like soon, and I guess it was such a high dose that the guy said instead of giving like anti-anxiety meds so you don't have a psychotic break, they gave me Haldol from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh yeah.
So so eventually, I didn't know what the hell was going on, but I didn't have any pain.
Right.
Boy, you were super sedative.
So and all kinds of crazy shit was happening. So I was watching an NBA game, and it was like Legos, and this wasn't a psychedelic thing. It's hard to describe. It's almost like what it does is it dissociates parts of your brain, which is why it can help break like a pain cycle or a depression cycle or whatever. And then you take booster doses like every week or two in very small amounts to help that pathway. So when you dissociate stuff, your conscious mind is like, not experiencing things it's ever experienced before. And I was not experiencing pain, but I was experiencing really weird stuff. And I've only taken very occasionally other psychedelic things, and this was nuts. So I would never take a high dose recreationally, but if you have some crazy pain or depression or something issue, and a forward-thinking doctor, then check it out. You can get a drip or an intranasal or something. You just have to look really hard.
I was watching a TEDx talk on ketamine, and the comparison there was that as far as someone's mental health, like for physical health, we have things like vaccines where you take a vaccine and then that helps you prevent having a disease in the future. You take a vaccine and then you get exposed to a disease, and because you had the vaccine, you're less likely to be afflicted by that disease because you took the treatment before the exposure.
Yeah.
That makes sense? And then they're basically making the same comparison. We don't have that for mental illness, so to speak. For anything that's anxiety, depression, etc. based, we don't have anything that you take beforehand, and it prevents you or makes you more resistant to contracting a disease or developing some symptoms or whatever in the future. And they were saying that ketamine is actually one of those things where it makes it where it's more likely that you're much more resistant to even something as low levels like social anxiety in the future.
Yeah,
It's a stress inoculator.
Yeah, I hesitate to even say it like this, but have you guys ever read this book Island by Aldous Huxley?
It's on my bookshelf.
I have not read that one.
I haven't read it yet.
They introduce drug use when you're a kid, partially so you don't abuse drugs later, but partially for that reason.
Mm.
And there's all kinds of stuff like, take ice baths every day and do whatever else, so then you are better at handling stress. But ketamine can actually work like that. And the cool thing is we don't know all of exactly why. And ketamine at like one dose or at small sustained doses is not harmful. Like the one thing is possibly urinary problems if you abuse it. So, it's just too bad that research doesn't go in that direction, because there's so much research on SSRIs and they come after the fact and they do nothing before the fact.
Mm-hmm.
But ketamine can give you some perspective, just like mushrooms can. And if you have that perspective, I don't know if that's physiologically tied to what it does to the receptors, but I would guess that could inoculate.
There is some evidence that psilocybin does that.
Yeah.
It actually impacts the neural connections.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know in what ways ketamine and MDMA are similar in their effects?
I don't really know. I don't want to, because I'll probably misspeak if I hypothesize.
Well, I'd imagine part of the reason is that there's just isn't that much research done on MDMA.
Yeah.
Like it's just now going through, I want to say it's phase 3 trials. Like it just
Yeah.
is moving into the last phase of trials to make it where it's available again as a prescription drug
Yeah.
for MDMA treatment resistant psychotherapy.
Yeah. So all of whether it's LSD or ketamine or whatever, what's unfortunate is that all the research gets done in the U.S. and all the places where it's used commonly, other than like Silicon Valley, it's Mexico and stuff. So there's places in Mexico where they'll try all kinds of much more effective things for various conditions. I'm not saying like some stupid cancer thing, that's going to kill you, but mental issues don't respond to pharmacotherapy. And you know much more about this than I do. And doctors who get into that stuff often move to other countries so that they can test it out in their non-controlled clinical trials. And there are case reports, but I think it's mostly phase 3 now for.
Yeah, I'm trying to set up an interview with somebody who was one of the first LSD researchers, and yeah, he lives in where does he live? Yeah, somewhere in Eastern Europe.
Okay.
Yeah, somewhere. I can't do it here. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, what else are we missing on
CBD?
What's some obvious health?
Oh, yeah.
Well, CBD is something that's kind of coming on the scene right now. It's just now they've figured out a legal way to ship it to all 50 states. And so now that's becoming a much more common thing. I have a few friends that are involved in CBD companies. What are the benefits of that, or if there are any?
So CBD, high CBD strains, CBD in isolation, and CBD and THC can all have different effects.
Mm-hmm.
And possibly the coolest effect of CBD alone is, and I think I've only seen one study on this, but topical preparations for pain. And actually it's possibly best used in combination with other things. A lot of people, even doctors, don't know that there's peripheral opioid receptors. And that means that, the huge opioid epidemic could possibly be mitigated by rubbing opioids on places that hurt. But there's just been so few studies.
Interesting.
And there could be some synergy with adding some CBD to the opioid mixture. And then, going back
Maybe
full
mix it
circle.
with kratom.
Yeah. So, and I live in the Bay Area, so like every street corner basically is one of these things.
Right.
Somebody taking or selling. But interestingly, like there was a medication, an anti-inflammatory, Voltaren, that's commonly used for joint pain. And then this other one came out called Pennsaid, I think, where the anti-inflammatory was in a base of DMSO. And
Nice.
so DMSO
Penetrates.
is this old school compound that's used for pain and some other stuff, and it crosses the skin so easily that if you have like cologne or perfume on your skin, it could come out your breath.
That was another thing that was really popular, like in high school. Like you sprain your ankle on the football team,
Yeah.
you put DMSO on it.
Yeah.
And then I feel like I haven't heard much about it in the last
So, like,
10 years ago.
Definitely mix testosterone with that.
Because
yeah.
the taste.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true, but yeah.
So I used to go to this in Chicago. I
People did
went
when you were young. That's what they did.
Not when I was young. Never mind. We won't talk about that.
Okay.
So there haven't been DMSO studies in years, like many, many years. It's still used in labs for other stuff, but not therapeutically. But there was a guy at this powerlifting gym I went to in Chicago who, it's like he got hurt all the time, and all of a sudden, every day he was better, and we couldn't figure out why. And then he told me one time, and I bought DMSO, and it works. And now when I say it works, I don't mean like you take it no pain, because people think about pain like it's a symptom, but pain is like the opposite of contentment. So as many things as cause happiness cause pain. So if DMSO works for a specific type of mechanism for pain, it won't work for all the others. But DMSO does help, possibly because the sulfur in DMSO, or possibly because of something else. But when they put this anti-inflammatory in DMSO, doctors started using it more, and not just because it was the newest drug on the market, but I think the base works, and if you compound a cream at a compounding pharmacy that has CBD and some other stuff, and like gabapentin and other things that, relax nerves, I think that's one way to get around opioids. But that's just my opinion.
Is there a lot of, from what I understand, there's just not a lot of research on CBD yet, just because of due to the prohibition.
Yeah, and like we said before, there's not going to be a lot of research probably in the next 4 years, so it's going to be a lot of trial and error on people's own parts.
Yeah. What about cannabis overall? So you mentioned THC. So CBD is a compound. One of, I think there's about 40-something useful, or we suspect to be useful compounds.
Yeah.
So we have, the CBD is one of the popular ones, and THC is the psychoactive compound in the cannabis plant. And there's been shown, like from what I understand, a 3-to-1 ratio of THC to CBD has been shown to be pretty effective for recovery. Have you heard anything like that?
Yeah, so we have a page on effects of marijuana in general and compounds, and it's a tough one because did we talk about meta-analysis before?
No.
So the issue with most studies done on CBD, THC, or just pot in general is, like we had covered a study on marijuana and creativity, and what they did is they randomized people to different amounts of pot or nothing, and then they did brain scans and other stuff, and there was no increase in creativity. Now, you have to take it with a lot of grains of salt, because how do you measure creativity? There is a standard test for a certain type of creativity, but there's different types of creativity to test, and you can't do all of them. And that's an issue with almost all trials. And then there's all kinds of other issues, like the effect on somebody who smokes regularly versus hasn't smoked at all, or the effect on old people versus young people is often completely different.
Yeah, I've never smoked at all. You're just fucking terrified.
Yeah.
How are you going to be creative in that state?
Yeah. And it's hard to study, and which makes it even harder because it's hard to get research money for that now.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and in the Bay Area, everybody smokes, and everybody reports back to their like quantified self friends about what happens. And I've seen all kinds of different things. So I used to work with a physician to develop a quantified self program for his patients who were addicts, and then later his patients who had metabolic disorders, and then later for people who just wanted to perform better. And it's just so different. Like this one person was previously a smoker, thought it was okay to smoke again because he was trying to lower his anxiety, and then he just dropped out of the program because I don't know. We don't even know what happened, but once he started smoking, I don't know if he was the prototype on the commercials of you lose motivation, or he started taking other stuff, or I don't know what. Somebody else, they had so much anxiety that they couldn't interact at family gatherings, and then just a low dose of vaped marijuana and it's gone, and they're functional. So I think the research isn't good enough yet to trump experiences.
Yeah. I think if you want something safe and easy for anxiety, Kana, I think that's legal. It's a little root you can make tea out of.
Oh, okay.
Kana. No, not kava. I'm talking about Kana.
But what about kava and Kana together? Synergy.
There's possibly. Kava tastes like shit though, so I'm sure they've got kava bars up in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Have you ever tasted it?
Yep.
It's gross.
Yeah, but
It's like dirt, right?
I think I inoculated myself early on by taking unflavored BCAAs when I
Oh,
first
Oh
started
yeah,
lifting weights.
yeah. Everything tastes good. after
Everything
that.
tastes good.
I make this joke in class all the time when I ask people. Actually, I want to get your take on BCAAs in general. That's a good one. Maybe even HMB too. But I make this joke about BCAAs nonetheless. Like when I ask people, like, how many do you, if you take BCAAs, like certain amount of hands go up. And if I say, how many of you, or what's your favorite flavor? If you have an answer to that, you're not taking BCAAs for the right reason. So it's usually like, oh, I take the watermelon one. What? Like, oh, okay. Does it do anything? Well, it's just an excuse to drink a flavored drink because most of the BCAA drinks are so flavorful now.
Yeah, BCAAs taste like emergency. You know, there's no differentiation, but you know, the general. I think possibly most people know now that BCAAs usually aren't worth it. You know, all muscle meat proteins contain BCAAs. Dairy contains BCAAs. Possibly some people who are fasted might benefit from BCAAs, and then possibly in synergy or to antagonize certain amino acids crossing into the brain. But that's not what people take BCAAs for.
Right.
You know, they take it for muscle gain, and it's not. You can't hack your BCAAs or your muscle growth. You know, if you're watching your calories and you really want to only buy leucine, you know, okay. But there's very few instances where you have to cut out those other protein calories.
Yeah, it's generally it's usually my list of most overrated supplements. That's not to say they don't work at all. You just laid out a bunch of instances when they would be helpful, but it's generally very overrated.
Yeah, and it's just you know, price is an issue, and BCAAs aren't super cheap, so
Yeah.
I'd like to hear more about the matrices that you told us before we actually started recording, where where you have a visual display of something like BCAAs or vitamin D or what have you, where you show on your site in a very easy to follow visual way how strong the evidence is for a list of different benefits for a supplement.
So we have matrix on each of our big supplement pages where it has an outcome, like let's say BCAAs and muscle growth, and then or muscle protein synthesis or whatever other intermediate outcome there is, and then a list of the studies that have been done and the strength of evidence and the direction of the effect. So, you know, oftentimes it's mixed evidence. That doesn't get shown by supplement companies, but there will be mixed human randomized trial evidence, but solid rat evidence. And we 99% of the time focus on human trial evidence because we only want to tell you about animal evidence if it's for like a side effect for something, because side effects are not systematically collected by the FDA. So oftentimes you can only get mechanistic stuff from rats or case studies. But you know, in our matrix, we'll have the full list of effects, and that's where it's good to look at something that you might think you know everything about, like creatine, because new research will get, you know, pushed to the top of our list, because that's where most of the studies are. And there's not a ton of new research being done on innovative uses of creatine for muscle, but there is for brain stuff. So that's where you'll want to look at this matrix and possibly even read the studies.
So it kind of works like this, and please correct me, but if we're going horizontally, it'll have the different effects horizontally, right? So growth or cognition or strength or speed or whatever, right? And then as you scroll down, it'll give you green or yellow or red or whatever the color scheme is. It tells you like green, or I can't remember what it was. It means that there's a very large effect or something that is minimal, or there's an arrow, right? So you can look up what you're trying to get the outcome for, and then you can figure out, okay, is it just like, or is it like, whoa, this is really something to do? And then you have resources also for what form to take it in, what amount, what time, and all that stuff is right there all together, and it has all the 100 or 200 studies on BCAAs in this case are all in that spot, right? But it's all matrices out.
Yeah, so like another example is some people take lavender for sleep. Lavender is used in like, you know, holistic, whatever, aromatherapy, but lavender actually does have an effect on the brain. So lavender could help with intrusive thoughts that keep you from falling asleep. And it could be a weaker alternative to medications. So like in the matrix, we'll have outcomes for anxiety, for sleep latency, and for other stuff, and then how much evidence, which is for lavender not going to be much, and then where the evidence leads you. So a bit of effect or a large effect or whatever. But for something like lavender, it's pretty important whether lavender was studied with other stuff, because you want to know, was it the proprietary blend of lavender, was it lavender aromatherapy, or was it lavender as a pill? Because those all work differently. And then we have that for everything. So for fish oil, like fish oil is not a monolithic thing. There's different amounts of EPA and DHA. At some point, or if we haven't already, we'll incorporate krill oil and some other alternatives to fish oil. And then even fish oil differs depending on whether it's in pill form or the liquid form, because oxidation of the fatty acids can be different. So form matters a lot, and when you take stuff matters a lot, and that all usually gets lost. So it's good to look at the matrix.
Boom.
Dope.
All right, do you have like an Instagram account where we can look at like booty shots and stuff like that?
I have one just for booty shots.
Yeah.
I think I have Instagram, probably, but I don't use it. Facebook, I'm on Facebook. That's where I post stuff at Miranda July. That's a long story why I'm not Kamal Patel, but it's Miranda July.
All right.
All right.
And obviously people should go to examine.com.
Yeah,
Check
go
out
to
what you guys have going
Examine.
on.
We answer every email, even if it takes a few days, and we like hearing about people who are curious. So email us.
I think you're on Twitter, right? Examine.
I'm on Twitter too. Examine.com is our company, and then I'm at Zen Kamal, ZenKamal.
Dope.
All
Thanks
right.
for joining us today. That was insightful.
It's my
Yeah.
pleasure.
Yeah,
That was
man.
very fun. Thanks,
Yeah.
dude.